Tensura X Gate. Thus the JSDF fought their X How a Realist Hero Rebuild the Kingdom by NoruSensei. Chapter 15. During the war, after Soma Kazuya's coronation. 3rd POV. As days go by, the war was looking not so good for the Russians and Chinese combined forces. On the Kuril Islands, the Russians tried to attack a small Japanese base located there, but it failed miserably as Tempest Japan units were pushing them out of the Kuril Islands. The coalition of Chinese and Russian troops attacked Sapporo, but it also failed and they suffered major casualties. But there is one shocking news came as Shizu was having her tour in Kamago City. Less than Shizu-sama, I had something to report. Greater than a spy told her via thought communication. Greater than go ahead. Less than she asked. Less than the North Koreans just started invading South Korea. They had also bombarded its surrounding area. Greater than he reported. Greater than got it. Relay this message to the others. Less than Shizu urged. Less than ha. Greater than then the thought communication cuts off. Is there something wrong, Shizu-sama? Asked Kumiko. I just received a report from one of our spies in South Korea that the North had begun their attack. Shizu told her. Shall I contact Rimuru-sama, Benimaru-sama, Hinata-sama, and Rumina-sama about the matter? She asked. Please do so while we take a tour of this city, Shizu ordered. At once, Shizu-sama. Then Kumiko contacts Rimuru, Hinata, Benimaru, and Ruminas about the matter. Filled diamond, filled diamond, filled diamond, filled diamond on the continent of Randia, in the former Elfrieden Kingdom, now Kingdom of Fredonia. Many events had happened. Mainly Soma sent an apology letter to Star Dragon Mountain Range. Despite Rimuru saying that he doesn't need to, he still went and wrote the letter. Another is Soma slowly abolishing slaves in the kingdom. He had made a law with the approval and advertisement of Rimuru herself that the nobles who managed their lands the best will have a rank of nobility to be raised. This worked significantly as many were buying slaves who could read, write, and do mathematics. Another was the introduction of hygiene into the kingdom. It was with the help of 3i race and also the creation of antibiotics. Hild Norg and Brad Joker were great doctors and had extensive medical knowledge. They were first taking good care of the kingdom's population and educating them on hygiene. Then Soma's most waiting reproduction of shoyu, miso, sake, mirin and among others were being made by the mystic wolves in the kingdom-supported fermentation factory, Kikuru. They had finally perfectly recreated it, and after Soma and Rimuru for some reason was there tasted it, it was approved. Another issue Soma had faced was the refugees staying in the kingdom. Aside from Soma and Rimuru, who was present was Hild, Lisha, Carla, and Owen was with them. As they reached the refugees' camp, Soma talked with its leader named Jirukoma and his sister named Komain. They were surprised to see that Rimuru was with them, but Rimuru said to them not to mind her as she was just there to observe and she has nothing to do. Which both of them reluctantly agreed. Soma had asked Jirukoma what was his decision on the matter. It was either they leave the kingdom, or join them as citizens of the kingdom. Komain was surprised by this, was about to say something when she was stopped by her brother. Then Soma and the rest waited for a couple of minutes for Jirukoma to decide. After a couple of minutes he then answered that those who doesn't want to be a citizen of the kingdom, will be going somewhere in the north for them to join the fight and reclaim the lands they missed. Rimuru then offered them that if they stayed as citizens of the kingdom, those who does really want to go back to their lands will be working under her. What kind of work? It was for them to first populate Soma's new city, and another was for they'll be a backup army under her banner when in case she decides to explore the northern lands. After some thoughts, they had agreed to the terms. Rimuru also stated that they could stay here in the kingdom as a permanent resident if they had changed their minds to not pursue their old homes. To which, Komain and Jirukoma nodded in agreement. Soma and the rest were amazed by Rimuru for the refugees to agree on her terms and conditions. She is a literal goddess after all. Soma Kazuya POV. It was 2 weeks since I have talked to the leader of the refugees. I was sure that those who really pursue to be back at their lands would leave the kingdom, but Rimuru-san convinced them to stay. Well, that will actually help us in the future. Currently, I'm going to meet Lisha's parents. Hakuya was guiding me to the room where we would talk privately. Rimuru-san was currently busy instructing the refugees, or should I say, new citizens and temporary citizens of the kingdom. The Kuroniko Corps are posted to watch the surroundings, so please, take your time, said Hakuya. Wakata, all right. I replied as Hakuya bowed and left. I then opened the door to see both of them are standing and was waiting for me. Long time no see, King Soma. Elisha Dono greeted with a smile. Long time no see, Soma Dono, greeted Albert Dono. Indeed. Long time no see, Albert Dono and Elisha Dono. I greeted them back. You could probably say that it was night time as we went on the balcony to have a seat. They also offered me some tea which I accept. As we sat on the chair, I grabbed my cup of tea and blew on it before I took a sip. Thank you for coming today. And also, congratulations on your victory against the Principality of Amidonia, and its assimilation with the kingdom, he said. It has only been half a year since I gave up the position of king, but all of these achievements, it would not be strange for people to hail you as a great king. Albert Dono added. Not at all, it's all thanks to Rimuru-san, Lisha and the others' help. I humbly said as I took a sip of my tea. As I bring down the cup on the table, I then said with a smile, we can finally sit down and meet like this. Indeed, my apologies for making you wait so long, he said. Up until now, I've asked to meet Albert Dono a few times. Like back when I needed help to get the three dukes to support me when I still knew nothing. I asked for his help to convince Castor, who rebelled due to the sudden change in the king's position. At that time, he said that this kingdom is already mine and that he had no more roles to play anymore. Then since it all worked out well, I asked for an explanation. And his reply at that time was to wait until the right time for him to tell me everything. Today is the day he said he would tell me everything, and so here I am today. You will tell me everything, right? I asked them with a serious expression. If you so wish it. Albert Dono replied. Then I have 3 questions, I said as I made a number 3 gesture with my fingers. First, is the reason you gave up the position of king to me. When you summoned me to this world, although that was our first meeting, after you asked me for a plan to strengthen the kingdom, you let me have the crown. Then you also engaged Lisha to me. I then paused for a second. Though I was able to move freely thanks to that, it was still too incomprehensible. I'm just a young man who came from another world that you just met for the first time, so why you would let me have the king's position? I asked as I looked at Albert Dono. He said nothing. My second question, about the matter of Georg's self-sacrifice. Former general of the army, Georg Carmen. He sacrificed himself by taking all the blame and gathered everyone who politically opposed me under him. From the outside, even with Lisha's letter trying to convince him. It would not be strange if he had planned this for the long beforehand. I paused as I get the cup of tea and began to take a short sip and placed it back on the table. I only saw him face to face in his very last moments. He literally put his life down for this plan, which was something definitely impossible if it was not for his undying trust and loyalty. There's no way he would be loyal to me given that I'd never even met him before. But it was easy to guess where his loyalty and trust were directed towards. I then looked at him sharply. Sorwa. That is, the previous king. In another word, to you. He also said that one day, I will hear everything from that person when the time comes. And my last question. Why would you not meet me until today? I then finally asked the last question as I then began to take a sip on my tea. If you wanted to wait until things calmed down, we could have met after the war or after the unification. So why was there any need to wait until now? I added. Albert Dono puts down his cup of tea as he then looks at me with serious eyes. First of all, let me say that the answers to all of your questions are connected to one thing. One thing? I curiously asked. He nodded. In order to explain that to you, let me answer your last question first. We had to be extra sure. Albert Dono then paused for a second as he took a deep sigh. We've been considering whether it's better to let you know everything or to keep up this situation where we don't tell you anything. But I'm not that strong to keep the crimes that I've done to myself. He then stopped as he held Elisha Dono's hand and looked at her for confirmation, which she nods her head. Crimes? What does he mean? I thought to myself as I asked this question. I was then asked by Albert Dono. Soma Dono. Have you ever wanted to restart your life? I was then caught off guard by it, but I regained my composure. More times than I can count. But why are you asking me that question? I answered and asked. What I'm going to tell you here is the story of a certain kingdom in a certain world and a certain foolish king. I would be interested to tell that story myself, a familiar voice said. All of us present were surprised to see Rimuru-san drinking wine as she came into view. She was holding a wine glass as she walks towards us. She was wearing a red kimono with her hair let loose. Why, you must be. Albert Dono muttered something only to be interrupted by Rimuru-san. I'm indeed the goddess you've been hearing about, Albert, she said with a smile on her face. D-demo, B but W we didn't see nor did ever hear you from before, said Elisha Dono. Ah. Well, that's because I only came here now because I found this interesting, my child, she said with a smile on her face. And let me tell you this isn't the first time nor the 7th time you used your powers, Elisha-chan, she added. D-do you imi nan dezuka? W what D do you mean? Elisha Dono asked weakly. It just means that this isn't the second time Soma was here, Rimuru-san answered. Do you imi dezuka? What do you mean, Rimuru-san? I asked curiously. Shish. I'll answer them one by one soon. For now I'll tell a tale that will be also includes the a certain story of Albert Kun was supposed to tell you, she said with a wink as she has her finger near her mouth gesturing for us not to say anything. Then Rimuru told us the story where there is a woman who saw the ending of the kingdom by her future, alternate selves. That ended temporarily when she had married a king who was laid back but can be good enough. The vision returned when a boy was summoned. At first he was sent to the empire as payment, but when they realized their mistake they sent that memory to their alternative selves. But before Rimuru-san can tell the story about what was Albert Dono would tell me, she was stopped and insisted to Rimuru-san to let him tell that story as he was feeling guilty. To which, Rimuru-san agreed as she drank her wine. There was a certain king. He was not a fool, nor was he smart. His rule was neither good nor bad. As if he was the picture-perfect definition of the word normal. However, the world was not. A demon lord made its appearance, and the world was thrown into chaos by the demons. The kingdom was far from the cries of war. However, in terms of provisions and economy, it wasn't able to make any meaningful reparations as the kingdom itself was slowly sinking. Then one day, the kingdom received an order from the kingdom in the west to perform the hero summoning ritual. Unable to defy the large kingdom, the king proceeded as he was told. The ritual succeeded. A young man from another world was summoned. The king was now sure not to give the young man to the western kingdom due to the previous sight he had saw. Then the young man said, in order to fight the demons, first, the kingdom should strengthen itself. Then he paused for a second as he took a sip of his tea. This is the story of what's happened up until now, right? I thought to myself as I looked at Rimuru-san who was enjoying herself eating some meat. The king understood the talent that the young man possessed and took him as the kingdom's prime minister. The young man answered the king's expectations, and slowly strengthened the kingdom. Around the time when it seemed that the famine and poverty of the kingdom were coming to an end, people started to get jealous of the young man, as the young man disregarded the high-ranking nobles in order to repair the kingdom. As expected, greedy and proud nobles held some grudges against that young man. They repeatedly whispered in the king's ear that the young man was trying to bring down the kingdom, and that he was a cancer to the kingdom. Ho! As Albert Dono was about to say something, Rimuru-san intervened. However, the young man also amassed allies. One of them was the general of the ground army of the kingdom took the young man's side. Castor and Excel were also in his favor but secretly. Of course, some nobles were not happy with that. Rimuru-san said it with her expression of, as the matter of fact, smile. And so they start whispering lies about the young man to the king. The king then started to grow hesitant and suspicious. At this rate, the young man would only find more enemies and the kingdom would finally break. Rimuru-san then paused as she took a sip on her wine. As she puts down the wine glass, Rimuru-san then looks at both Albert Dono and Elisha Dono with a knowing look, then finally she looks into me with an every knowing look with smile on her face. Of course, I knew all of them because I've been observing them. The reason why you didn't see me? That's because I didn't choose to show myself. But now, things had changed because of the decision you made, Albert Kun. You gave up your throne to Soma Kun. I was sure that you would still make him a prime minister, but this time you will choose to ignore the nobles, she said with straight honesty as she smiled. All of us were speechless by what she had said, but then, after she drank all of the wine and poured herself some more, she then put the wine glass down and spoke. Let's get back to the story. I'll let Albert Kun continue for now, she said as she then gestured Albert Dono to continue. Ehem. Then finally, the king made a decision. The young man was relieved from his post as prime minister. Losing his place, the young man decided to go to the Ground Army General's castle. However, the nobles didn't stop there. He then paused a minute as he was uncertain to say something. Fine, I'll tell the rest, Albert-kun. You were apologetic to Soma-kun here because you felt guilty for the alternative you did to alternative Soma, correct? Rimuru-san asked as she looked at Albert-kun, whom nodded his head. After that time, Amidonia invaded the kingdom with the help of those nobles you had executed Soma-kun. Those same nobles that Georg had gathered were the ones who helped the alternate Amidonia. Rimuru-san said seriously as she sternly looked at me. The reason why they felt guilty it's because of Ground Army's city castle was destroyed and was burning into ashes. It was believed that both you and Lisha died during the attack. Now shush, as I know you're about to say something, Kazuya-kun. I know you well, so let me finish, alright? Finally, as the Ground Army's city castle fell into Amidonian hands, the Amidonian army together with the nobles' army were marching towards the capital. The king hurriedly summoned the army. However, no one trusted him as he had left the young man and the general of the Ground Army to die. As the Air Force had a small army and the Navy was far away from the capital, they focused on defending their own territories. In the end, no army answered the king's call. This left the king with conscription, which also did not go well. Despite the revolution that the young man brought with him being hated by the nobles, it saved the people, and since the king condemned that young man, no one answered on the king's call. Left with no allies, as the king was surrounded by the enemy army, he faced his foul end. The king believed in the lies and destroyed the one who really cared for the kingdom, due to his incompetence. He reaped what he sowed. Rimuru-san finished the story as she took a sip of her wine. After executing the same revolution to fix the kingdom rather than being given the king's position, the other me was taken in as a high-ranking officer instead. If I was not the king's position, what would have happened? Would it have ended exactly as in that story where everything was burned to the ground as Rimuru-san and Albert Dono had said? I thought to myself as I asked those questions out of curiosity. I know that Rimuru-san is a goddess, she would know about this. But the both of you, it's as if you witnessed that yourself, I muttered. It's because we did. Or more like, it was shown to us, Albert Dono answered. Was shown? I asked. Yes. Thanks to my wife and her special ability. You do know that my wife is a dark-type magic user, right? He asked. Yes, although neither I nor Lisha know any details about it. Since only a number of people know about this, I hope you do not leak this information. Elisha, my wife's special ability, is to connect memories to a certain person from the past, Albert Dono said. I was then surprised by this. There is still a bit of continuation to that story. Then Albert Dono said the story almost the same as Rimuru-san said. But this was more detailed, until Lisha was born. Elisha Dono's dark magic. Is this time slip? No. Time leap? Can dark-type magic really do something like that? Sending only the memories of past self? But as I was about to continue my analysis, Rimuru-san suddenly began to speak. Soma-kun, I know you were interested into Elisha-chan's dark magic, but let's go ahead on what Albert-kun would like to say, she said with a smile. Seriously, it mustn't have been easy for the other me, but it wasn't easy for me either. Driving out son-in-law and leading the kingdom to its end. Even after Elisha explained everything to me, it still feels like a sin that I had committed. So allow me to apologize for what the other me did. As he said that, Albert Dono lowered his head. Please don't, even if you say so. I have no such memory of being wronged at all. I said, panicking as I waved my hand dismissing it. Please allow me, for my own sake, he insisted as he bowed. I see. I said, feeling uncomfortable. Now then. I wonder if I have answered your first and third questions. Albert Dono said as he raised up his head. Indeed. I first managed to say. Then I thought, the second question is about Georg's self-sacrifice. Then I realized. Wait, did you tell that story to Georg as well? I asked very curiously. Ding dong, Kazuya-kun. Rimuru-san commented as she sips her wine. I'm not that strong as to handle this burden alone. Georg is the one that I trusted the most in this kingdom. He believed everything I said. Then he decided on that plan to eradicate all the corrupt nobles. Albert Dono explained. So that's why he raised that rebellion, huh, I thought. It was my fault that Castor also ended up suspecting you. But as the plan was already put in motion, I was not able to tell anyone, and I ended up causing you more trouble, he said apologetic. I thought I had always carved my way forward by myself, but it seems that I have only been running on a preset rail, huh? I thought to myself. Then I swear I heard a chuckle from Rimuru-san in my thoughts. But when I took a glimpse of her, she was there enjoying her snack. What can I say? It makes me feel a bit down, I said as I tried to ignore her. Please don't be. You reached a different ending than from that time, no? Albert Dono asked. This kingdom, which was at the end of its lifetime, was reborn as a new kingdom, Fredonia. I have seen it for myself that my decision to hand over the crown was not a mistake. And of course caught the goddess' interest on us, he said proudly. We then all looked at Rimuru-san, who was giggling as she held the wine glass and gave a wide smile. I'm happy to hear that, but, in the end, around which point did the future change? I asked curiously. Right from the very start. After all, this time. You were engaged to Lisha from the start. Surprisingly, Elisha Dono answered. Lisha? I said in surprise. In the other world where you were the prime minister, she was still Georg's secretary. That was when you met her and she noticed your talent and eventually fell in love with you, she explained. It seemed that when I relieved you from the post of prime minister, that girl was against it and desperately tried to convince me to rethink my decision. But I did not listen to her, and she sadly returned back to Randall. To that Randall was burned down. Albert Dono sadly said with regret to his expression. Then in that world, Lisha accompanied me to my death, huh? I thought to myself as I felt sad. Then I realized something. How about the other people that I brought in with me? I curiously asked. They weren't there in the first place. You from that world were not able to use the broadcast device due to the opposition from the nobles. Of course, not even for gathering talents either, he answered. Then it weighed me, so I wasn't able to use the broadcast device close hollow corner bracket, huh? That would have been difficult. It's only thanks to everyone's help that Fredonia was established. Which means, it could be said that the usage of the broadcast device was the turning point, huh? And it was mostly thanks to Rimuru-san who came to me at first as my personal advisor, especially my engagement with Lisha. Due to the engagement, I was a king candidate which guaranteed my legitimacy. It must have helped suppress the opposition from the nobles. I made a whole analysis. I hope you treat her dearly, Albert Dono suddenly said. Of course, I'll do that even without you telling me, I confidently said. Albert Dono smiled as he and Elisha Dono stood up from their seats. Well then, I have told you everything I know. This will be the real end of my role here. Now we will entrust everything to you all and leave the castle, said Albert Dono. We're thinking if living quietly somewhere, he added. Huh? Why? I asked feeling surprise. Having the previous king around will only give you trouble. We had decided right from the start to hide after we saw that the future had changed, he answered. I see, so you have made up your mind, huh? I said with a smile. If it's you and Lisha, together with goddess Rimuru and her adopted daughter Juna, I'm sure we can leave this kingdom to you. Both Elisha and I firmly believe so. So please, take care of them for me. Or no Masuko yo. Father warmly said as he looks at me with pride. I then lowered my head as I bowed in front of them. Certainly, Chichiyu, father, Hahao, mother, thank you very much for everything, I said with love and respect. Era, how manly. Rimuru-san commented. I then raised my head as I gave them a smile one last time before I went to the door. I was about to open it when suddenly a question came into my mind. If I may, can I ask you one last question? I asked. Sure. Father replied. In the world where I was the prime minister, did they find my Lisha's body? I asked looking serious and curious at the same time. No, Randall was reduced to ash. Nothing was found there, Father answered while shaking his head. They didn't find our dead bodies, which means, I then realized something. In that case, Lisha and I might have survived, I said to them. Nah. They both said at the same with shock and surprise on their faces time as Rimuru-san giggles. The story might have been different if I was alone, but Lisha was there too, right? So there's no way I would do nothing knowing that certain death was coming, I said my analysis to them. I'm sure I would have done everything I could to make sure that we were safe, even if we were killed by the enemy soldiers, They should have at least found our bodies, but that's not the case. Which means, I'm sure we both survived. I reassured them with a smile. Then the both of them were crying in relief as I told them my analysis and assurance. Arigato, or no Masuko yo, thank you, my son, father managed to say as he held mother into his arms. I then got out of the room and stopped as I looked into a window to see the moonlight. It was snowing. I then heard a familiar voice. What are you doing there? You'll catch a cold, you know? Lisha asked and said with concern on her voice. Everyone is busy with the preparations for the event, so sorry, but let me stay here for a bit, I replied as I looked at her. Lisha then placed the blanket she has brought with her on my shoulders and she also put some on hers. We were so close to each other sharing the blanket as we looked into the night sky. Phew, the air outside is cold, said Lisha. Saudane, yeah, I replied. Ah, it's snowing. Hantuda, oh, you're right, I agreed to her. Yutsukushi ne, it's beautiful, Lisha muttered. I then glanced at Lisha. It feels like Lisha is the goddess of victory, I thought to myself as I admired Lisha's beauty. I then grabbed her by the shoulder and faced her towards me. Soma? She asked, looking surprised by my action. I then looked into her eyes, to be honest. Before Aisha, Juna-san, or Roroa, I should have said this to you first, but, please marry me, I said with all of my sincere feelings. She blushed and didn't say for a few seconds as she smiles. Then she said, that was too late, you know. I love you too, Soma. Let's stay together forever from here on, Lisha said as our lips touched. I then embraced her as I enjoyed the kiss with her, then all of a sudden I heard a voice. Notice. The individual, Lisha Elfrieden, has completed the requirements set by the original creator, Rimuru Tempest-sama to evolve. The sleep effect had been cancelled by the original creator, Rimuru Tempest-sama. Reconstructing. Evolving from human to enlightened, successful. Requiring all of the individual's possessed skills. Successful. Hero Egg has been acquired. Unique skill, Destiny Queen Fortuna, has been acquired. Giving all resistance. Successful. Additional lifespan had been added. End of evolution. Notice. The individual, Soma Kazuya, has acquired unique skill. Fate Queen Fortuna, end of announcement. Then we heard a very familiar voice. Fufufu o youth these days, Rimuru-san said with a smirk on her face. We suddenly separate our kiss and hug at the same time due to Rimuru-san surprising the both of us.